Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA-USA. IPA-USA is the affiliate of the International Play Association in the United States, so we're so happy that you've joined us. As part of our efforts to promote play, we're happy to introduce Porch Play Chats. And these are really short conversations about a range of topics that with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. And you can find the latest Porch Play Chats by visiting Instagram or Facebook, or by going to our website at IPAUSA.org. So I'm Deb Lawrence, president of IPA-USA. Joining me on the porch is Lisa Murphy, who's one of our board members. Hey, Lisa.
Hi.
And today we have a really special guest who's an expert on play, Emma Tempest. So Emma, we're so glad you're here.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
And Emma is a presenter, and she is going to talk to us about loose parts. And we're going to start it off with, how do we find them? We always hear loose parts. We need to have more loose parts, but how do we find them?
So I think for me, the thing about loose parts is before we go looking for them, we need to make it a definition. We need to know what it is when we say loose parts. Mm-hmm. So going back to the Simon Nicholson's theory about everything, everybody has more creativity when they're given the right opportunity. So I don't think of myself as a very creative person. I steal other people's creativity and then use it on myself. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of the point, that once the materials are there, you are the person that then uses it and brings that creativity to the forefront. So when he talks about materials that can be moved, carried, combined, connected, disconnected, I feel like some people sometimes get into a trap of thinking certain things are loose parts. When really it's more about you, the adult, being loose in what you let the children do and do not do. So for me, my kind of personal definition of a loose part is something that leads children to ask, what if? Which is a huge question that I think sometimes as adults, we don't even want to go there. We don't even want to think about the what ifs. But it's the what if with no fear of failure. So if you have a toy or a material or a resource, however you want to label it, if you're looking at it and it inspires you, or it sparks that creativity, or it makes you curious, or it fuels some sort of emotion in you that you just have to do something with it, that to me is a loose part. As to where we can find them, I would say they're everywhere. You know, a pen is a pen, but a pen can be a loose part. You don't have to just write with a pen. You know, you can make lines with it, you can draw with it, you can make stacks of them and pile them up. I think it's more about you having that definition of what a loose part is yourself. Mm-hmm. That was a long answer.
No, it's a great answer.
What I like about your answer, Emma, is that it includes some of the lesser known part of Nicholson's theory, which includes the elements, that air could be a loose part, wind, rain could be a loose part, that it doesn't have to be an actual tangible thing.
Yes. I also think music is one that people forget about. And if you think about a spoon, I always think, you know, everybody's played music with a spoon. Everybody's done that. But there's always going to be one child that's never done that before. And the second that that idea is in their head, if an adult stops it, then that spoon becomes less loose and it becomes more of a rigid, static thing that we can't do all those manipulating things that I just talked about, connecting, disconnecting.
So when we're thinking about, I really like how we've been talking a lot in the Porch Play Chats about being flexible and letting go of some of the control that we think we've gotten ourselves into for some crazy reason. And so if I'm a teacher in a classroom, or if I'm a parent at home, and my toddler, and I'm old, so he's 42. Just FYI. But Rod, even before I had early childhood education, right? Rod would go into the kitchen and pull out all the pots and pans, and I'd hand him a wooden spoon and off he would go, right? And so again, I think it's broadening your mind to what could be a loose part.
Right.
But
I would also add, Deb, that you saw the inherent value of it, and that was probably way before you ever heard the concept of a loose part. But there's this understanding it's not going to get broken. The kid is going to be engaged. I get some time away from needing to like be all up in the kid's business. So why would I not embrace that?
Yeah, and so I've done some workshops in China where we needed to take loose parts with us, but I also had to worry because my suitcase couldn't be more than 50 pounds, right?
You don't bring in the cable spool and the tire are coming with you.
No, it made me sad. But I really had to sort of think outside the box. So where did I go? I went down to 2 or 3 restaurants that are near me, and I said, could you save me the wine corks?
Yeah.
And I mean, they say come back in 2 weeks. I had 1,400 wine corks that went with me. I'm like, boy, people drink a lot in this area.
You bring up a good point though, because sometimes if you don't ask, you don't get.
That's
so
it.
So like when I'm coaching and presenting about loose parts, one of the things I like to say is you've got to make like Elsa and let it go. Let it go, let it go. Because if your mindset is so strict and closed to, I have to order resources from this catalogue, or I can only get things if they're approved by my director. Not saying that we shouldn't do that, but it's that thing of, well, what if I got this? What might happen? And then leveling out what is the risk versus the benefit.
Yeah, it goes back to what Rusty was talking about earlier in that risk-benefit analysis. And so if I'm a teacher and I want to bring loose parts into my classroom, and my director says, no, you have to buy things out of this catalog.
I'm going to point out that I'm saving them a lot of money.
Hello.
Yes, exactly.
I don't need that math manipulative. I'm going to use whatever.
I got rocks and sticks and pine cones, and we joke that how much did you pay for that? And we say free 99. That's how much I paid for it.
Yeah. And so I think it's convincing administration who might be administrators and not really early childhood folks.
Right. And that's kind of what I try and do when I present about loose parts. It's not necessarily about, where to get them and how much they're going to be. It's more about that mindset of shifting it from, it has to be from somewhere, or it has to cost this much, or it has to be within the budget. So like in England, a lot of our loose parts came from the parents. We had a collection day we called it Throwaway Thursday. And every Thursday they'd bring all their recycling because we would take it from them quicker than the bin men would. So we'd put it in the classroom. We'd make sure everything was clean, and all sharp bits were kind of put to one side, and the kids loved it. And it was even more appreciated because the children were like, look, I brought this today for you. And I'd be like, no, it's for you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's a perfect way to, when I was a teacher, I would put up a list needed, I needed milk jug lids, or
and then eventually you think, are we going to get enough? And then like a month later you're like, stop bringing them. Stop. We're good.
We have enough for the next 7 years. Yes.
The book Beautiful Stuff that I'm sure you guys and our viewers are familiar with. What I loved initially about my first exposure to that book was, oh my God, they're giving you ideas of what to do with all of these things that you have found yourself accumulating, for the last 10 years.
Well,
it is a downpour right now. So if I look distracted,
it's because
the heavens have opened.
Oh, build the ark sort of thing. Be careful, please be careful. I would tell when my students in a classroom, when I talk about loose parts too, I'll say, let's go outside and find some. And we go out, and we're fortunate that we have a like we're surrounded, we're like in this forested area. And so when we go out, I'll say, you need to find 10 things, at least 10 things that we could add to our loose parts collection. And they are on the hunt. I mean, they are so excited to go back out. And LaDonna did an activity at one of our IPA-USA presentations at NAYC where she had paint chips. You know, I walk into Home Depot and they start hiding everything that's free, right? You know, the paint stirring sticks, they hide them. They're like, oh my God, there she is again. Because I'll say, can I have 10? You know, but I went to the paint chips because LaDonna said, I just hand them paint chips and say, go find something that's matches this color. And I'm like, oh my God, what a wonderful idea. Loose part.
It's often the simple things that are the best, though. And I think sometimes we get so bogged down in trying to put our professional hat on. Like, I'm the teacher and I can do this and I need to be respected. And we sometimes make it more complicated than it needs to be.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. The other place I went for China, the other place I went was to Goodwill, Salvation Army. Oh my goodness, the things I found for pennies that I was so excited about that were lightweight enough that I could throw them in the 50-pound suitcase.
I wrote an article called Shopping on the Side of the Road.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, I make poor Chris pull over. I'll go,
yeah.
honey, stop.
Facebook Marketplace, anything like that.
Yes, absolutely. I'll say, stop, honey. I got to put that in the trunk. And he's just like, okay, no problem.
We knew that my brother-in-law was really paying attention right after him and my sister got married. They were driving from San Diego to Arizona where they were living at the time. And Chris says, pull over. We need to get that for your sister. And but hold on. My sister goes, what is she going to do with that? And Chris looked at her and said, she never told us that we needed to know what we were going to do with it. She just said, pull over and pick it up. And that's when I knew that I liked that man.
He could stay in the family and was welcome. So if we're thinking about loose parts and we're thinking about, we've talked about some places where we can find them. And I think, in our neighborhood, we have, I think it's like once a month on Thursdays. Everybody puts everything out that they don't want anymore, right? So it all goes out on the curb. And honestly, I drive around. And we have a guy in our neighborhood who has a huge truck who drives around and picks it all up and puts it in. Who knows? I would not want to be married to him. What he does with it. But I'm out there looking around trying to see, because it's stuff that people are giving away that they don't want anymore.
And I think for me, when I have that conversation with other educators, the concern is about if it's junk or not, or if it's safe, like if there's splinters or nails or whatever. And again, it's that mindset of, if that's stopping you from picking things up, then it's going to stop you from letting them play with it in a certain way. There's nothing to stop you from going and sanding some things down and taking some nails out and making it as safe as possible. But it's more about you empowering those children to be able to say, yes, I can do this with this thing. And you can't do that if you don't have the right environment, if you don't have that mindset of not judging what they're about to do, not rushing in to save them when you think something might go wrong. It's kind of what Lisa says about being there but not in the way.
Yes. And the other thing I think is that you don't, as Lisa was saying that her brother-in-law figured out, you don't have to know what you're going to do with it. Children will figure it out, right?
Right.
They don't need you to have a vision of what they're going to do with it. They're very creative if we allow it to happen.
Oh, definitely. And I think also having that power of pausing and kind of just quietening that concern in your head, and whenever you feel like you might want to jump in with a comment or a question, to just hold your tongue a little bit and just wait and see, because it might be that they take it in a completely different direction that you haven't even thought of, but it ends up being like the most amazing thing ever. And I think that's what I love about loose parts, the fact that they always seem to come up with things that I would never have thought of.
Yeah, and they show their creativity. So I remember back in the days, and I think it's still happening. It's driving me crazy, when um, because we knew that open-ended questions were great, right? That and some programs would tell me, oh well, we make them ask 6 open-ended questions an hour, and I was like, what? And they said yes, because open-ended questions help children develop language and give them lots of opportunities to expand their vocabulary. And I said, open-ended questions, when you're forcing it, is interfering with children's concentration and learning. So we kind of need to take a deep breath, right? So it's like we get the newest gimmick, right? The
Mm-hmm.
newest thing, and then we just go over the deep end with
Mm-hmm.
it. And I'm like, you need to chill out a minute. let's think about what the other side of that open-ended question looks like. And did you just stop a child's creativity because you were asking them, oh, what color are you playing with? Oh my God, really?
And it just for me, it's so fake. And
Uh-huh.
kids know that. Like, just have a
Yes.
conversation with them, because then not only does your whole body language relax, but it's much more genuine, and the answers they give are likely to be more open because you are yourself being more open. And that's not to say, don't have some questions in mind that are open-ended that might help you, if you're in that kind of starter point. But again, I think it's that pressure of wanting to feel like a teacher.
Mhm.
And the best thing we can do as teachers is to facilitate that kind of conversation, not force it.
Yes, exactly. And so if children are using loose parts, and if they're constructing the most amazing thing, let it go unless
I was
they
going to
ask
say,
you.
terrific teachers have teeth marks on their tongues.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
Don't always have to be saying something.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Well,
no.
and it sounds like you were talking about how sometimes the newest, biggest thing, and sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't get struck by lightning, but there was a big boom. I'm like, I got to get inside.
Yeah, I was
Um,
afraid you were getting wet too.
I
So,
was. That's why I decided to come in. But I think that same thing, and forgive me, and please tell me if you've already kind of touched on this, is that I think the concept of loose parts has kind of been subjected to that same hurry up, jump on the bandwagon.
mhm.
And I know Emma knows this about me. Deb, I don't know if you've heard me say the words that I'm more of a fan of that gross underbelly, dirty side of loose parts, not always the small, bright, shiny bits. I'm saying that it needs to be brought, I think, more into balance.
Mhm.
As I think with our quickness to jump on the concept of loose parts, that there's been room for some misinterpretation along the way.
Well, and the other thing I worry sometimes about, we try to give children everything, right? So we have all the pots and pans and all the plates and housekeeping. We have, um, oh, I want to make a store. Oh, here I've got a cash register over here in the closet. Let me give it to you. Instead of just letting them figure it out.
Which loose parts definitely allow that to happen.
Yes,
But
yes.
the time piece is so crucial. And I'm sure, Emma, you could speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah, I was saying earlier about how sometimes it's you having to work out what you can give more or less of. So it
Mhm.
might be time, it might be another adult there if it's a big loose part. Say if someone's trying to climb up on a spool and they're feeling a bit wobbly, you can be there, but you don't have to be in their space physically helping them up. They might just want you on the side.
Close by.
And even things like actual amount of resources, because I know sometimes with loose parts you can get a bit bogged down with having, I know I did this back in the day, having 10 of something, so you could make 10 frames with loose parts. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes it's too overwhelming to have so many things, but then other times I'm thinking of things like acorns and little like screws and shiny things like that. Those kind of multiple amounts can be very overwhelming to children if they've never encountered loose parts before.
Mhm.
But the more that you add in over time, the more they can become creative with the multiple ways you can use them. And I am a fan of the shiny things, but I do get what you're saying.
Oh, I am too. I'm like a magpie.
Right?
I love them. And I think it's important just to keep the balance. But I want to go back to what you said about the overwhelm. I found that as a participant in a lot of the loose part workshops when they first were kind of becoming popular, that is what I saw. If I had to make an interpretation, I felt that teachers felt overwhelmed. Like, I don't even know what to do. I'm feeling like I should know what to do with these beautiful piles of things, but I have nothing really in my memory or my wheelhouse is to do that. So I like to remind teachers that you have to have some working knowledge of loose parts, which doesn't mean you have an agenda or something that you want them to be doing, but it's not really okay for you to expect that kids just automatically bring this understanding of what to do with this stuff to the table if you've never let yourself kind of figure that out too.
Right. And like, I did the same as you, Deborah, about bringing all my loose parts with me to conferences. And half of the time, just letting the attendees play is fascinating, because you have, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I find that I have a group who play for a little bit and then they get either bored or stuck. And by stuck, I mean they're trying to produce something and they're finished. Or you have the group who play on their own and create something very specific. Usually I found it connected to their emotions. So they like tell a story with the loose parts, or they might make, you know, like the mandala type pretty pattern things. And then there's like another group who end up kind of teaming up, and they'll have two people working on the same thing. And I find it fascinating. It's like every time I do this, that's the kind of groups that unfold. And when I think about how children play with loose parts, yes, there is sometimes an end product that eventually comes out, but I don't often see children going in with an idea to make an end product. It's something that naturally unfolds, and then they go, "Oh, look what I did!" And I feel like I have to kind of be very intentional with how I teach about loose parts, because sometimes you can see the adults going, "Well, I've finished now. What do I do next?" Or they make something symmetrical or something with a pattern. There's not much looseness to it. And I think that's something it's really hard to explain, but like you said, Lisa, you kind of have to do it yourself. You have to get in there and play with them yourself before you can let it go and have all the children do it.
I'm having two thoughts. I'm going to interrupt you, Deb. First of all, Emma, you need to write a paper about what you just described. Seriously. Seriously. Especially because I know you do that presentation, so you have the opportunity to gather some data. So I'm honestly suggesting that to you. And also, though, my play therapy brain kind of jumped in on that. I'm always intrigued. Like, I would be very guilty of, like, I am guilty of trying to sometimes over smush together all of my passions and when I realize that sometimes they just have to kind of orbit each other. But the intersection between adventure playgrounds, loose parts, and sand tray play therapy is fascinating to me. And so when you commented on the emotional state of what might be represented, I have to throw that out there.
I wrote that down in my notes as well. That the whole play therapy thing, when children are trying to process what's going on around them in their life and trying to understand what's going on, and they're using the objects that they have available to them, the amount of times when I've seen adults do that and I don't even think they realize they're doing it, and I'll walk over and I'll say, "Oh, tell me about what you're doing." And they'll say things like, "Oh, I'm remembering when I went on holiday with my grandma who passed away." And it's like they don't make that connection, and it's totally fascinating.
I remember when I went to Dr. Drew's play workshop the very first time, remember? Right? We love him. And I remember, I love the way they set it up. And I actually used that approach when I was in China working with kindergarten teachers. But what I found fascinating was once I got, and I had a wonderful childhood. I played outside for 12 hours a day, right? So my mom would put my lunch on the back porch, and I wasn't allowed in the house, it- until it was time to come in for dinner. And so all those 1950s memories that people have, no, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I never saw my mom during the day. I was outside playing. And so what I found interesting, since I had all those opportunities with lots of nature to play outside, what I found interesting is when I chose my place to play and my materials, my pile of materials, I was so self-conscious. I would look around at what other people were doing, right? And I was like, what are you doing? Just start playing. And I really had to talk myself into giving myself permission. And then once I got into it, I was like, Dr. Drew talks about, you're in a totally different space, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the beauty of the way they design that play session is that they turn their backs on you. You can't, because people would keep looking at them saying, are we done yet? Are
Yeah.
we going to stop? Because they felt so uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But if you allow them the time, so I'm trying to relate this to children, if you allow them the time, those large blocks of time, it is amazing what happens.
Yeah, I had the same experience when I saw him at the Seeker conference.
Mhm.
It was that similar thing of you were individually doing your own thing,
Mhm.
but you could feel people like looking around going, are we allowed to take things from other tables? Like, I really want some of that loose part on my thing. And
Mhm.
then it was, okay, everyone worked together at your table. And I remember our table, we built like a whole community. It
Yes.
was like a whole, it wasn't even a village, it was like a whole city. But there was still, because there's no talking,
Mhm.
it was like you all had your own ideas, but they
Mhm.
somehow came together through the play. And
Mhm.
I just think that's so powerful.
It is. It's so powerful. So if we can give teachers permission
Mm-hmm.
to let it go, as you were talking about in the beginning, let it go and give children the space and time that they need or choose to do. And don't tell them, Legos is open and Lincoln Logs are open and so is
For
open and
20 minutes.
yes, and we're going to rotate. I all I want to do is pick up the Legos and Lincoln Logs and other manipulatives and just throw them because I can't do anything in 20 minutes,
And that,
especially if you only give me 12, right?
right?
So,
Yep.
oh my. So, 12 other porch play chats just came up to mind, but I think it's important that we give teachers permission
Mm-hmm.
to,
100%. And that's what I try and do when I train. I try and give them the information, let them experience it, but then coach them through that uncomfortableness. Because for some people, that uncomfortableness is what stops them. And when it stops you, it stops the children. So, I have some kind of like tools in my toolkit that can help with that. But a lot of it is, I think it is down to well-being. And I know we're going to talk about that tomorrow, but a lot of it is, if you're not comfortable with those things, then the children will pick up on that. And you can have all the information in the world, you can have all the research journal articles, but if you don't feel comfortable, it's not going to make a difference.
yeah, I think it's good advice. And the other reason why I think teachers are sometimes feel like, well, I'm bored, right? I'm bored. And so the children must be bored. And so we need to move on. Instead of using the time when they feel like they're not doing enough to do observations of children
Mm-hmm.
and not to interfere with what they're doing. So I think we need to give, like we sometimes teach children a replacement behavior. you know, you're not going to bite your friend because that hurts. See their tears, right? So you could bite this. This is an okay thing to bite. So we give them a replacement behavior. Sometimes I think we need to give teachers a replacement behavior because they're feeling like they're not doing their job or they're not teaching.
They're not playing teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to give them a replacement behavior. So that could be a whole nother session that when we talk about How do you give yourself a replacement behavior?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just knowing what your role is as the teacher. And, if you're taking notes, helping when necessary, mediating those difficult times, being there in case of a safety risk behavior, your 3 questions, Lisa, about being intentional, and just empowering the children, because I feel like when you do that, it empowers you. It almost works. It's like reverse psychology. Like the more freedom you give them, the more freedom you have to kind of relax a little bit and not get all those teacher stresses in your head.
Yes, absolutely. Emma, this has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we look forward to the one you're going to do on self-care.
Ooh.
And so to view other Porch Play Chats, make sure you visit IPAUSA.org. And until next time, thanks for listening and keep playing.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Emma.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.